Hi, I'm John Coggan. I'm Professor of Law in the Centre for Health, Law and Society at the University of Bristol Law School, and I'm a part of the UK Pandemic Ethics Accelerator. The Ethics Accelerator has brought ethical perspectives to bear on the big questions that governments, communities, organisations and individuals across the UK have faced since the onset of the pandemic. In May 2022, we brought together experts from academia, the law, public health, medical publishing, journalism, and formal and informal advisory roles to policymakers to reflect on their experiences of the pandemic and what we had learned about the place of values in public policy and decision making. In this film, our speakers consider the limitations of responsibility for offering ethics advice during a pandemic. We ask, whose job is it to advise, and who should make the final decisions?
The policy decisions need to be very clear in justifying how they have balanced competing rights and conflicting views. So we were very clear. We weren't telling people what to do.
For a government to have ethics input, the various advisory groups, and have ethics input into those subgroups, I think is without precedent. And it's likely to be, I think, one of the most sustained and intensive periods over which a government has had access to ethics advice on policy involving in real time.
So given those perceived contexts of urgency, of uncertainty and emerging but currently low quality data, we tried two different sorts of responses to incorporating ethics advice. The first was to phrase our advice conditionally. So what we essentially tried to do was to incorporate the ethical advice by saying, well, these are the questions you should ask yourselves and the values you begin to play. In relation to the COVID care triage, we approached it in a slightly different way. And what we tried to do was to create an adaptive framework. So the basic idea was that the guidance would incorporate an ethical framework of what was at stake, driven primarily from capacity to benefit and avoiding any questions about the value of any particular lives, just whether the person's life could be saved. Secondly, a decision tool, which tried to make the best available evidence accessible to frontline clinicians.
I think it's really important to ask ourselves what the nature and scope and the limits of those responsibilities are. And I don't think that's had as much attention as it ought to. So I was a member of SAGE of that period, and I have some responsibility for the advice that emerged from those meetings. And clearly there would be times, I think, when it would be appropriate to resign or speak out publicly. But that can't be the default every time. That can't be the sort of thing you do every week. So, the default position has to be to argue the case, to make the tools available, and to do the best job you can.
I think one thing that law is really bad at is anticipating things, because judges like facts and they like evidence and they like certainty, and they don't like speculation and worries and general problems. They want something that they can really focus on and grapple with. And added to that problem is the problem that where something is difficult and raises ethical issues or questions of social policy or public policy, the courts have all sorts of formal and informal strategies for avoiding answering those questions.
That's one of the big problems. We were menaced by paralysis. We were, when we were bringing out the guidance and people were saying, well, you can't use that criterion, you can't, and I know I'm repeating myself here, you can't use that criterion. Okay, fine. Give us a criterion that is coherent, that will work in this context.